Hello, it's December 5th here in Tokyo, December 4th there in Loveland. I'm Kevin Ryan. This is Tom Ryan Remembers. And you remember that December 5th was the day we moved from Carpentersville to Weston Avenue. And it was snow flurries on that day. I remember it
Yeah.
well. And we got some cheap rental company to move us. And it was they had similar to U-Hauls, not anything special. So and it was yeah, that was the weekend which I changed from my school in Kings Road School in Carpentersville to Gifford School in Elgin, on 3 blocks away from our house on Weston Avenue. So that was the day we moved, and I remember it was snow flurries on that day. What's the weather like there today?
Beautiful day, warm. We sat out on the porch with Dan for 2 hours and we didn't even have coats on. So I don't know, it's about 70 degrees. Beautiful day.
Okay, anyway, so this episode is about Marilyn again. And this is about the Dumbarton years. We moved from Weston Avenue. You moved after most of us had left. Why did you move from Weston Avenue to Dumbarton Oaks?
Well, uh, they called Dumbarton Oaks, it was called Garden Quarter, the name of the subdivision. And it was built on a series of hills and ravines and creeks and big trees and a beautiful spot, but hard to build upon for a builder who wants to build one-story houses on a quarter acre. So some architects got hold of the land, and I imagine he bought it cheap, and he decided he would build uh, inexpensive homes,
Townhomes.
townhomes, yes. And so you had your bedrooms on the top floor, and then living room, and then a basement. So there were a lot of stairs, so they weren't really good for old people, but we weren't old yet then, and so we moved in. We called it Teacher Hollow because so many teachers lived there because they could afford it. It was cheaper than a real house. They had a homeowners association, and when we moved in, I was on the board, and I was the beautification committee, and I could go around and point at with the landscaper and point at shrubs and places and put this here and put this there, and then he would plant all these, and
Now,
they'd take care of
did
them, trim
sorry,
them,
didn't Ginger actually work for one of the landscaping companies?
yes, they'd never hired a girl before. And I'd had the owner in class, Dale Dodge, he knew me. And so I said, you ask Dale, why couldn't a girl do that? And so she went and got a job. The first time he'd ever hired a landscaper who was a woman. And she went right at it. She worked hard, and it was, she enjoyed the work and mowing lawns and trimming and weeding. And so
So
that was
I remember it being very nicely manicured and very well taken care of. But
one of
somehow,
the reasons we moved there was because we went away on a little vacation and we came back and something's different here. And we realized that they'd all been painted and new roofs had been put on while we were gone. I mean, they'd have a big crew come in there, and the outside maintenance was maintained by the homeowners association. And we didn't have to, I mean, it came out of our payment every month that we paid for the services, but we didn't have to worry about maintenance on the outside anyway. We took care of the inside of the house and maintained that. And so we had 3 bedrooms upstairs. They were little, and then down the stairs, and then a living room and a dining room, and then the basement. So it was quite a few square feet for 2 people, especially. It was really nice. And we looked out the back window. It was all windows because, of course, you didn't have any windows on the side. You had neighbors on either side of you. And they were nicely soundproof because we almost never heard any neighbor's noise or radios too loud on either side of us. And we looked out the back over a beautiful uh, open land, again, kind of hilly and not suitable for building. And I even had a garden out there on somebody else's property. I don't know whose it was, but I planted a vegetable garden out there, and we had a deck there. And so it was a nice house. And we could go and leave it, lock it up, and go on trips. And the kids were gone now. Now Marie had Chrissy, and Marie had to work, and so Chrissy would spend time with us. She was in like first grade, and she went to the Illinois the school right next to the subdivision, and then would come over back into the house, and we took her a lot of places and took care of her while her mother worked, and it was a wonderful time.
Okay, now you said that mom didn't like parking.
Oh yeah, she had to go. She was still working in the psych ward at St. Joseph Hospital, and she had to go out in the cold of the winter, especially, and get in her car. And she worked nights, so she would start. It was dark when she started and dark when she got home, and then there'd be snow on the parking lot. Now we had a service that came and shoveled the snow, so we didn't have to shovel snow, but it was not, they weren't always there right on time. So Marilyn hated it because there wasn't any garage, and the car would be covered with snow, or it would rain, and she didn't have a garage. And so that was one of the savings they had, is they had a big parking lot that we all parked in, and no garages. And that saved for the builder. And so that's one of the reasons they were cheaper. We had a swimming pool though.
Right.
And so it was very, I thought it was a neat place. And I enjoyed being on the board a lot more than I enjoyed mowing my own lawn. So that's one of the reasons we moved there. You kids were gone. We didn't need all that space at 29 South Weston. That was too big for us. Grandma was gone. Everybody had
Now, you had 3 bedrooms though, and I evidently Chrissy spent some time there.
Yeah, she would stay overnight sometimes too, when her mother was busy, and so in between the birth of Ryan, Marie's second child, Christina, her first child, would spend a lot of time with us, and we enjoyed her very much. We often called her our 5th kid, but I don't think Marie cares for that, because
That's when Marie was living over near Larkin High School, right?
Right. They weren't very far away, and we'd entertain her quite a bit.
Now, you also, besides staying there, you actually got away quite a bit and started.
Oh yeah. So now soon we were retired. We both retired. I was only 57, and the state of Illinois said we have too many teachers, and instead of laying off beginners by seniority, we'll give a deal to the senior teachers who are at the top of the salary schedule. And I was making twice as much as a new teacher would make. So it was a good deal. The state gave us this early pension. I got it when I was 57. We were supposed to retire at 60. And so that's a really early retirement. And I only had to put in like $1,000, and the school district put some money in, and the state mostly paid for my early retirement. And it was very nice. So we went on trips, and we bought a motorhome. And one of the first trips we had was down to Tennessee when Kelly was born. Now, Kelly has just had her second great grandchild, and that's how long ago that was. But we went down there for her birth, and then we drove on down to Florida. See, now we could travel in the South we always traveled. We camped a lot with the kids, but it was too hot to go down south. But now we could go any time of the year, and we went to Florida in the winter time. And my folks lived in Florida, and we visited them and got them settled in a assisted living place because they were now as old as we are in their 90s. And they sold their condo, and we were there for the sale. And we thought about moving to Florida in retirement. We were looking for a permanent home for retirement, and it didn't necessarily have to be in Elgin. A lot of our friends had already moved. More and more were moving out of Elgin, and we just didn't have anything. You kids were all gone. Only Marie was still there in Elgin. So we were looking for Shangri-La, some place wonderful to move to, and that we explored. We went up and down the Royal Highway, the Blue Ridge Mountains, and Ashland, South
North
Carolina,
yeah.
all the way down into Florida. And we decided, no, we didn't think we liked Florida. My folks had liked it, but we didn't want to move to Florida.
I heard, yeah, mom didn't like the bugs, right?
A lot of bugs in Florida, right? It's warm all year round, so there isn't any frost to kill off the bugs. We thought about how hot it gets in the summertime, and a lot of Florida people would travel north to get away from the heat. So we wanted a place that was more year-round good weather. And we went across the country through Texas, along the Rio Grande River. And we didn't just stop for a day. We'd stay there for a month. And we kind of liked Texas, but we heard that in the summer or all year round, they have a lot of wind down there. And it just it blows up the dust, and it's dry and windy, and that didn't appeal to us. So we kept on, and we went all the way up the West Coast, Oregon, Washington. They're really nice places to retire. And we ended up back in Colorado because Dan had moved out there, and so we wanted to visit him. And we started looking around Colorado. We had been there for a year on sabbatical, and we all liked Colorado a lot then. Didn't want to leave and go back to Illinois. But so we ended up in Loveland, Colorado. We found that place, and no, we didn't know anybody that lived there.
Uh-huh.
We thought it would be a wonderful place to retire in. That was no mistake.
Okay. And that takes us into the next episode, which is the Loveland years. So
okay.
Thank you very much. That was a good one. Succinct, nice, short. Do you want to say anything else about the Dumbarton years before we finish up?
Yeah, it was kind of interesting that the teachers that lived there would be socializing with our neighbors, and they lived in Garden Quarter. Now they called it Garden Quarter, and the streets were all named after famous gardens all over the world. And Dumbarton Oaks is in Washington, D.C. or near there. And great things. It was lots of gardens and landscaping. And Tuileries was another street.
Yeah.
And so
Dumbarton Oaks, though, was actually, the Washington Garden was named after another garden in England.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, so it was a double garden. Yeah.
Double garden, yes. And they some important plans for the new United Nations were established there at Dumbarton Oaks near Washington. That was in the news a lot.
Right.
But evidently the architect liked gardens, and he called it Garden Quarter and named all the streets that way. And no garages. And
so the land that was behind the house was open property, and you could actually see all the way over to McLean Boulevard, but it was pretty far away. There was no noise or anything. So
And
it's
it was,
really, yeah.
it wasn't flat, not nice flat. And the man who owned it, it didn't seem anxious to sell. And as I said, we put our vegetable gardens out on his property without his permission or his objection. And for years, I kept a garden there at Garden Quarter, and that was appropriate to name. And I really enjoyed that. I come home from school very stressed out, and I get down there on my hands and knees and pull weeds out of the garden, and it was wonderful therapy. But I'm talking about me, and Marilyn had to go back and forth between the hospital and Dumbarton Oaks until we retired. And I was 57 and she was only 53. Uh, so she
Yeah.
did work I mean, she didn't work right to the end at the psychiatric unit.
Right.
But she wanted to get a degree, and she always wanted a degree. She had a RN, it's a registered nurse. It
Uh-huh.
was 3 years, and she was trained in a hospital. And half the time you were just working your way through college by doing grunt work, but you learned a lot. We were hands-on learning. And she graduated with what's called an RN. She always wanted a bachelor's degree, as other nurses were all, then pretty soon now, all nurses get bachelor's degrees. And so a school, St. Francis School in Joliet, sent professors up to Elgin, and they would come different nights, and she would go over to the Sherman Hospital, and they held the classes there. And almost all the students were nurses from the two hospitals, and that wanted to get their degrees that were
Wow.
older.
Uh-huh.
That's how she gradually got credits one at a time, struggled, did the homework at home. And she was so pleased that she finally had a degree just like her kids.
Uh-huh. Wow, that's pretty amazing. Yeah, I mean,
It
talk
should,
about distance learning and sending professors all the way up to Elgin from Joliet. That's 100 miles, isn't it? Something like that. So,
they they didn't hire all the professors right from Joliet. They hired them even from Elgin. So they would they supervised and granted the degree,
uh-huh,
but professors came from different locations.
uh-huh.
Yeah, that's a good idea, I think. And have instead of all the students, 30 of them going to some other town, have the teacher one come to the students.
Well,
And that,
I was in charge of a company, a part of a company that would send 30 English teachers out to different companies for a business, and that worked really well. That kind of system is, yeah.
well, the
Yeah.
workers worked all day long and at their jobs, and then they had to go to class. They didn't want to go commute 40, 30 miles, 10 miles even. They could just go down the hall and sit down in the class.
Right.
And,
Yeah. Just before, just after their shift.
right.
Yeah.
Very convenient for the
Yeah.
students instead
Yeah.
of for the professor.
That's great.
And she enjoyed it.
So how it probably took what 6 or 8 years to do all of that.
No, only at about 2, not even 2. They gave her credit for from DePaul University. While she was in nurses training in Chicago at St. Joseph in Chicago, she had professors that came over from DePaul and taught classes.
Uh-huh.
They were mostly, reading, writing, arithmetic kind of things, not all about nursing. So they were all counted toward her degree. She had rhetoric and so on from DePaul. So she just had to get enough credits for
Top it off. Yeah.
top it off. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Ah,
she got a degree. And
well,
it
that's
was,
great.
she didn't get any more money, although nurses' wages were going up and they were in short supply, and she did very well, and that's continued. So that now nurses make as much as 90,000 a year, with a BS degree, bachelor's degree.
Uh-huh.
So that didn't, when she started, nurses like teachers were women's jobs, and they got paid very poorly.
Yeah.
Teachers still are paid poorly, but nurses are not.
No,
They,
anymore. So she chose the right field. Okay,
they-
well, good. Thanks. Thank
Good.
you. And let's see. Yes. There we go.